Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome into Denver Sports Coffee Break. We see all the comments already. I told you I was worried about this head coaching search 2 weeks ago, and my nightmare has began. So sad, Paul saying, happy Monday, Coffee Break crew. Good morning, coffee morning. Or good coffee morning, said Justin. So good morning to both of you. DMAC is still out, so we got Nate Jackson rolling it back again with us on this Monday. James Marilat, Rachel Vigil with you for the next 45 minutes. Both of you, how are you? How was your weekend full of football on Sunday? I'm assuming, Nate, you first.
Yeah, football on Sunday. I went to the Hofbräu in Westminster and went to this football Broncos alumni viewing event that they have there every year. There's an awesome big sports bar restaurant, ate a bunch of good food, saw a bunch of old Broncos alumni, had some laughs, and then, the day before, watched the Nuggets lose to the Philadelphia 76ers. No bueno on that one, but it was a good weekend.
We'll get into that because I know James has some feelings on it. But James, how was your weekend?
It's great. It was, a lot of youth basketball. Got to squeeze in the Nuggets. Got to watch all the games yesterday. So it was a sports-filled weekend all around. It was a good one. It was a good one. I'll tell you what, though. I had to go out this morning and get some things ready to go. It is a good coffee day because it is frigid out there. Holy cow.
Yeah, and here you are yelling at the school districts for delaying or canceling school on Twitter, James Marilat.
Well, here's the point.
Here's the point.
It's cold at 7. It's still cold at 9. It's still cold at 11. Like, what's the delay for? All that does is throw everybody's schedule off. You got to take kids at 9:30 instead of 7:30. For what? It's 11 below and then it's 5 below. It's the same thing. It's still cold. So either cancel it or just be like they used to be and just show up and deal with the elements. That's how you do it.
Okay, so you're on the board of canceling school, not delaying school.
I think delaying it, that makes no sense to me, right? It's not like it got warmer. It just is silly to me.
Nate, is your kid is 3? Am I correct?
He's 3. Yeah, he's 3 years old. Yeah.
So is he in preschool then?
He's at daycare right now, and actually they base their decisions on DPS. Whatever DPS does, they do as well. But we didn't get any notifications today. It was cold out there. Got the car running, and he wasn't complaining about it. He was ready, So we got to school on time, and everybody's good.
Bundle up. All right. Well, everyone in the comments, they are pissed because of the ref situation on the weekend, saying it's rigged. But also a lot of people are bringing up Vic Fangio. Oh, bring in Vance Joseph, one of the comments says. Whoa. So we're going to get into the games later on, but let's talk about Vic Fangio because he is all of the headlines right now going around. So earlier this weekend, it was tweeted that he was a done deal to Miami. Boom, done, going to be joining Mike McDaniels. And then it was, no. Mike Kliss tweeting out, no, he's not done yet, not done deal. And then he was also linked to the 49ers earlier this morning. Sounds like this head coach, a former Broncos head coach, might be one of the best hires, I guess you could say, for defensive coordinator, which we know because he's has a super promising future. He's obviously proven that he's a great DC. But are you guys surprised that literally he's the biggest name being tossed around right now compared to a coach for the Denver Broncos, James Marilat?
Yeah, I didn't think Vic Fangio would be more in demand than Sean Payton is at this point, but it seems that way. Look, I'm a little surprised by this. Obviously, Vic Fangio's a great defensive coordinator and has been over the course of his career. I don't know if he's been great. He's been pretty good. But you sit out a year, you're kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's mildly surprising to me that he's getting back in. It looks like he's going to. It looks like it's going to be Miami or San Francisco. I'd be surprised now if he doesn't get one of those 2 jobs. But Vic's a prickly personality. He's a little tough to get along with. So we'll see how he meshes with Mike McDaniel if it's Miami, Kyle Shanahan if it's San Francisco. To go from DeMeco Ryans to Vic Fangio, that's a hard right or left turn. That'd be pretty jarring. So. I don't think it would be a great hire in either place, but it looks like Vic is getting back in and good for him.
Don't they run his system, though, there? I think everybody's running the Fangio defense, and I think they do it. Well, no, I guess he does the 3-4, and they were doing the wide 9 thing. But no, Vic Fangio, when he was let go by George Payton said, this is the best football coach I've ever been around. I have to let him go as a head coach. He's not a head coach. He's the best ball coach I've ever been around. I think his reputation is very good in the league, and a lot of coaches would be happy to have his experience at defensive coordinator. He took a year off. He's still highly sought after. You got to remember when Vic was here, COVID hit, right? And Vic Fangio was just not equipped. He's not a good Zoom coach. He doesn't even know how to get into his email, And so he couldn't sit in front of his computer and talk to his team. he kind of was a victim of circumstance in my opinion. He's a really good football coach. No surprise that he's highly sought after. I think, San Francisco would be a good place for him too. So he's got two good options there.
Yeah, and you know what? He's pretty savvy. I would not be shocked if he chose San Francisco. You're inheriting arguably the best defense in football.
Right.
Your chance for success is a lot better there than I would say in Miami. Not that Miami's defense is bad by any means, but it's not near as good as San Francisco. So Vic's pretty savvy. I think he was going to go to Miami, and then this opportunity maybe is coming up that he wasn't expecting, and that would be the right move if I was Vic. I would take over DeMeco Ryans' group in San Francisco in a heartbeat.
And of course, this position most likely opening up because they are linking DeMeco Ryans to the Houston Texans, which hurts if you're a Broncos fan and he was your number one candidate to be the Broncos head coach. They are meeting apparently later once he fills out all of his paperwork and stuff with the 49ers. So what we're learning here is we've learned money can't buy you happiness. It sounds like money also cannot buy you a head coach. We also learned this weekend that Greg Penner had visited Jim Harbaugh again. They headed out to Ann Arbor and no offer was made. As Harbaugh reiterated, he's staying at Michigan. This is becoming desperation situation, and I do not like the look of it for the Penners or the Walton Penner group, James.
No, I'm with you. There were also reports over the weekend that they've already told Jim Caldwell and David Shaw and Ejiro Evero and some other candidates they're going in a different direction. Dan Quinn is going back to Dallas. It looks like DeMeco Ryans is going to Houston. Jim Harbaugh keeps telling him no. That really only leaves Sean Payton as the only candidate. Well, Sean Payton and Jerry Rosberg that they've talked to that hasn't officially been told, hey, we're going in a different direction, or hasn't told them they're going in a different direction. So, yeah, this is it's getting to be embarrassing at this point. And look, they might pull a rabbit out of their hat. The destination may make the journey worthwhile. Of like, oh, okay, they got here. That's great. Didn't matter that it was a little windy to get there, but boy, it's going to take some doing for this to turn out to be a good end result. It's been a fairly embarrassing couple of weeks in my mind.
I'm with you.
Look, I mean, we don't know if it's going to be bad in the end. They might be biding their time. Obviously, DeMeco Ryans is an important piece to this. And so what can you do if he's one of your top candidates and he's not ready to have this conversation yet because he's still playing in a game? What are you supposed to do? I don't like the desperation of flying back and trying to convince Jim Harbaugh to take a second thought at this. I think that looks a little bit pathetic. And if he doesn't want to be here, we don't want him here either. I think there's a lot of good football coaches out there. The Walton Penner group has to figure out which one works for this team. I'm just confused as to why they said we don't want, they dismissed the other four guys that they had an interview with and said, look, thank you, but no thank you. Even while the other guys are falling through. Why not put a call back into Ejiro Evero and say, hey, buddy, I know you're upset with us because the way we did your boy Nathaniel Hackett. Well, Nathaniel just got a new job. He's good. He's going to be fine. Why don't you stick around here and be our head coach? Or Raheem Morris or Jim Caldwell. Those guys are really good football coaches. I don't know why they've been told no, even in the light of these new guys falling through. So maybe they'll revisit who they're thinking about, but I don't have a problem with them taking their time. The football season, 2023 football season is pretty far away, guys. There's plenty of time to get this thing moving. They got to get the right guy, not just any guy.
No, I'm with you on that. And we learned last year not to rush it, right? They rushed it with Nathaniel Hackett, didn't want to wait for Kevin O'Connell to finish the Rams' run to the Super Bowl title. So I get you on that. But the only candidate they interviewed that they would have had to wait for was DeMeco Ryans. Everybody else they could have hired. So if one of those guys ends up with the job, it's going to be hard for me to believe he was the number one choice.
But why is that a bad thing? But why is it a bad thing not to get your number one choice if it didn't work out with him, if it just fell a different way, if he wasn't interested or he wasn't available? Why is that a bad thing? That's why you interview 8 guys.
No, you interview 8 guys so you can pick who you think's the best guy and you get him. If you don't get your first choice, that says something about your organization. If you don't get
you're a losing team.
Third, it says it's a situation. Somebody would rather go to Houston and take over the Texans than come to Denver and take over the Broncos. That's telling. Now I get it. He played there. His wife is from there. There are connections to the city, but it's also a place he left on bad terms. There was the lawsuit based on his injury, and they have no history. They fired their last 2 coaches after 1 year. It just seems like an odd place to want to go. So it's telling. If Houston is a better destination than Denver, that's telling. If you end up with your 4th or 5th option, doesn't mean they won't turn out to be a good head coach, Nate, but it does say something about the franchise at this point.
It makes me nervous because I don't like the look of it. Nate, we talked about this on Friday. The Broncos were always one of those top programs, the top organizations where everyone was like, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of it. Now it feels like they're just like sinking lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And you can't help but note that the main change there was the ownership group.
Yeah, I think the Broncos were a crown jewel of the NFL, largely because of Pat Bowlen and the way he ran things and the standard of excellence and just the way things had been for decades here. I will say, though, if you're comparing the Houston Texans to the Denver Broncos, the Texans have never been good. They've never had a championship. They've never known what it feels like to be on top. In Denver, we do know that. We've got multiple championships. The skids are greased for another championship. So where do you want to be successful? As a head coach, you have an ego. You believe whatever team you take over, you're going to win the Super Bowl, right? All these head coaches believe that about the teams they're taking over. So if I believe that I'm going to get it done, where do I want to get it done? Where would it be more fun to be the king? Would it be more fun to be the king of Houston or more fun to be the king of Denver? I would say Denver. Houston has had, in its 20-year existence, 4 10-win seasons. That's it. They've been bad pretty much every year. And also, you are assuming that he wants to go where his in-laws live. That's quite an assumption, James. We don't know if he likes them. We don't know if he wants to be around them. We don't know if he wants to walk downstairs and see his mother-in-law sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Maybe he wants a little distance. We're trying to get inside of D'Amico Ryan's head, but I think you're right. It's going to reveal itself in a couple days here.
But why would we not have seen an interview scheduled then with Denver again?
Yeah, maybe he wants to go Houston first. I mean, he just finished, right? So he's going to do Houston first because of his ties there. That's undeniable. I mean, maybe that's his preference. But hopefully he gets another interview and is able, and then Penners are able to make their case. But yeah, I mean, look, you can find a way to have a winning program without having your first choice. Sometimes your first choice is a bad choice, and you don't realize it until you go through this process.
Yeah, I think, though, we maybe need to take a different look at this franchise and this organization. You know, if you take out the Peyton Manning years, which were all about Peyton, John got Peyton here and Peyton was able to recruit free agents to come here, and it was a great 4 years. If you take those out, this has really been a 15-year stretch of this team being awful, right? From the day they fired Mike Shanahan until today, save for the little sliver there with Peyton Manning, it's been a mess.
What about Tebow?
Been a decade and a half.
Tebow time. They won a playoff game.
I love Tebow time, but let's face it, they were 1-4 that year at one point. They got to 8-8. They won a division that they backed into in a bad AFC West. It's been kind of a debacle. Other words come to mind, but I'll go with debacle. Since they fired Mike Shanahan, it really has been. This has not been a very good organization other than the 4 years when Peyton Manning bailed them out.
And is that really linked to when Pat Bowlen had to step away because of health? And, you know,
Yes.
Is it better to have just one straight owner? One owner who deeply, deeply cares, and this is their only thing that they care about?
Well, yeah. I mean, Joe Ellis was heavily involved in the hiring of Josh McDaniels. That was a bad era. Pat Bowlen did bring John Elway back, and that helped turn things around and obviously led to Peyton Manning. But yeah, a lack of stewardship in terms of guiding this franchise has been a problem for a decade and a half. It really has been. Mike Shanahan was the best head coach in franchise history by a mile. And when they let him go, they've pretty much been a rudderless ship ever since. The Manning years are the exception. The rule is this team has been bad. It's a poorly run organization and continues to be.
It's an interesting conversation because I see where you're coming from, but because like there is that stretch of obviously when they won the Super Bowl. So I don't think you can say that entire time. Like I know you're saying cancel out the other part, but there was still a stretch when it was really good and they were the top of the top.
Here's the thing though. If Peyton Manning had pulled the D'Amico Ryans and chose the Texans, that's one place he was looking, or he had gone to Tennessee, the Broncos would have been a mess during those years too. The Tebow year was awesome, but they weren't going to repeat it, right? The clock had struck midnight. It was over. They were looking at going and drafting Brandon Weeden from Oklahoma State. Like that's the guy Elway was really high on, who turned out to be a first-round bust for the Browns. So if you just play the extrapolate it or hypothetical game and Peyton Manning doesn't sign here, this is going to be one of the worst franchises in the NFL for a decade and a half. That's what it would have been.
So then you're saying the quarterback is more important than your head coach.
Well, it's been both. They wouldn't have had a quarterback during that stretch. And other than Gary Kubiak, they haven't had a good coaching hire either. I mean, John Fox.
So you don't think if Peyton Manning wouldn't have been the quarterback, that Gary Kubiak wouldn't have had success?
Not the success he had. No, they wouldn't have won a Super Bowl. I don't believe they would have. As good as that defense was, a lot of those people wouldn't have been here if not for Peyton Manning, TJ Ward and DeMarcus Ware, players that signed as free agents to come here. So no, I don't think Gary Kubiak would have won a Super Bowl. He would have done what he did in Houston, which is, be a playoff team, win 10 games, get in, get bounced. Nothing wrong with that. No shame in that. I'm not trying to knock the guy, but he would not have been a championship caliber coach without Peyton Manning. John Fox certainly would not have been a Super Bowl coach here without Peyton Manning. So it's been a lot of bad decisions in terms of drafts, the Russell Wilson trade, but hiring of coaches has been a major, major problem. That's why the fact that they're having to settle for their 4th, 5th, 6th option here should be very concerning. Does that make anybody feel like they're going to turn this thing around? It doesn't me.
Let me ask you this, James, about this new coaching search and this new ownership group. You talked about the years with Pat Bowlen on top and the Shanahan years as being the best years in Denver Bronco history. Does Greg Penner and his group need to connect somehow with that era, with the men who were involved with it? Or do they need to simply start something new and get the right people to start a completely new vision and a completely new journey? Because those are two different things. They said they took over for the Bolins and wanted to carry that torch, wanted to keep that standard of excellence that the Bolins set. Do they need to connect with that era or move on from it?
I think they need to move on from it. And that's no disrespect to that era, but it's the old saying, you can cross the same river, it's never the same water. I just think trying to rekindle the glory years is a mistake. And we've seen it with other teams around here, right? Well, they brought back Elway. Certainly the first 5 years of him being GM were good. The last 5 years were terrible. The Nuggets brought back Kiki Vandeweghe. The Avs brought back Patrick Waugh as their head coach. Now Joe Sakic has been great as GM, but like this continually trying to get in the time machine and go back to the glory years, I don't think it works. I think it's a different day and age. It's 2023. You got to find what works now, not what worked 15, 20 years ago.
All right, we're assuming that DeMeco Ryans is going to sign with the Houston Texans and become their next head coach. Does that mean that the best case scenario for the Denver Broncos is to try and get Sean Payton?
Probably. I mean, he's the best candidate still available that's not attached to someone, but all the problems with Sean Payton still exist, right? You still have to give the Saints something. He still has this resume that I think is extremely, extremely overblown with the one Super Bowl in 15 years with the Hall of Fame quarterback. So, but he's better than anybody else out there. And he wouldn't look like your 4th or 5th option. He would look like, hey, we really like this guy, but we didn't want to give up draft capital. And we didn't want to pay him $20 million, but when he became the best option, we went ahead and did it. They can save a little face if it's Sean Payton.
Nate?
I still like Ejiro Evero. I think you have to have that conversation with him. He had a very good defense this year. He understands this roster. We're forgetting, guys, it's about these players on this football team right now. How are you going to get those guys to play well and beat, by the way, the Chiefs, who are going back to the Super Bowl? That's who you have to think about beating. How are you going to get these guys to play well now? And to me, Ejiro Evero knows this roster better than any of these other candidates we're talking about. He was the best part of last season, and he's a young, up-and-coming defensive coordinator who everyone believes is going to be a head coach. They told him they're not interested. Well, reach back out and say we are now. Just like they flew out to Ann Arbor to talk to Jim Harbaugh, pick up the phone and call Ejiro Evero. He's already on your staff. He's taking interviews elsewhere. He's got his staff in place. I like that idea better than Sean Payton. Sean Payton, who's playing this game in the media, who's, it's like The Bachelor. Sean Payton is The Bachelor, and he's, has the rose in his hand, and he's trying to pass it out to others. You know what happens after The Bachelor, right? When you choose who you're going to fall in love with and get married, you go home, the cameras turn off. Real life is a lot different than that courting process. This is not real life, guys. We need to find a coach to get to work. I think Ejiro Evero is the best guy for the job.
Here's the only difference, though, is Jim Harbaugh told the Broncos no, and the Broncos told Evero no.
Well, I think Evero was upset by the way they treated his buddy. And apparently he went into that meeting when he was being interviewed to be the head coach, and he was unhappy. And he wanted to air some grievances about how he felt his buddy was treated. Nathaniel Hackett became the scapegoat. So I don't think he went into that interview fully open to the idea of being the head coach of the Broncos. I think he was still a little upset and bitter by the way things went for his buddy who gave him this opportunity and brought him here. That said, his buddy has moved on. His buddy's moved on. He's in New York now. He's going to be the offense coordinator there. So Ejiro Evero should move on too and go with the opportunity that's in front of him. And I know that the Broncos are moving on from him. I think that's a mistake. I think they should revisit that idea.
Yeah, I just, look, if that's how he went into the interview, that's a huge mistake, and that's a huge red flag. That doesn't sound like a guy that wants to be here. That sounds like a guy who wanted to take his opportunity to look across the table and tell someone off, give them a piece of their mind. That doesn't excite me very much. Plus, he's interviewed for.
He's fiery. He's passionate. He's loyal. He cares. That doesn't excite you, James?
No, that's also borderline insubordinate. So that doesn't excite me. But he also was interviewed for all 5 jobs. Maybe they told him no because he didn't interview very well, because he hasn't gotten any of the other gigs either. So, no, there's a lot of red flags. And the fact that he knows this roster, who cares? It's a bad roster. That doesn't help. If I'm grading the candidates, that wouldn't help Ejiro Evero all that much to me.
Is it really a bad roster, though, James, or is it a roster that was playing bad? To me, it's not. These aren't bad players. They weren't playing well together. When they started playing well together at the end of the season, they played well. It's not a bad roster.
Well, I don't think it's a great roster. I'll put it that way. I certainly wouldn't hire the coach based on who fits this roster, right? Like that was a lot of what I heard with D'Amico Ryans is, he runs a 4-3 and the Broncos have a defense that's based on a 3-4. Like, who cares? Who on that front 7 is worth? We got to hire a coach that is perfect for this group. I mean, Alex Singleton, Josie Jewell, Randy Gregory. I mean,
why are you saying their names like that? Those are good players. Those are good players you just mentioned there. Those two linebackers. Linebackers are good, James. They're good players. No, they're not good players.
Nobody makes more tackles 7 yards downfield than Alex Singleton.
Look, man, nobody makes more tackles than Alex Singleton all over the field. You're telling me he's not a good player for your team?
He's a good player. He's a good player. He's not a great player. So you don't hire your coach for the next decade, you hope, based on who fits with this group of good players that are fairly interchangeable. That just is silly to me.
Well, you can get good players when your salary cap increases. And breaking news, the NFL informed teased today that the 2023 salary cap will be a record $224.8 million per club, according to NFL Network. That's up $16 million a year from last year and $42 from 2021. More money, more stuff you can do with it, and it just shows that it's continuing to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. It's how you can pay your quarterback, even if they're not deserving, $250 million or whatever it is.
Is that all?
Yeah, nothing. That's chump change.
No big deal. But you know what? It's going to go up again next year. So it's going to continue to go up. So they're going to have money to spend, right? And so they are able to have some wiggle room around this albatross of a contract that they gave to Russell Wilson after never having him seen him play a single down. That's a huge mistake. Imagine how different this coaching search would be, or the conversations with potential coaches would be, if they had never signed Russell to that deal. If Russell was about to play out his last year and have to prove it, that might be a different conversation for a coach to come in who wouldn't be saddled to this guy. But it also is a challenge. I mean, as a head coach, what would you rather have? A proven commodity at quarterback, a guy who's a little complicated, you're going to have to get with him and get through to him, or a rookie who might completely suck like Zach Wilson or Justin Fields or all those dudes that we thought were going to be amazing who aren't? I think the known commodity might be more interesting to a coach who has confidence in his ability to get through to players.
That's exactly what I said to Mace and DMAC last week about why would D'Amico Ryans choose the Denver Broncos. I'm like, well, you have a quarterback that can win. Otherwise, you're going to have a rookie who's coming in and it's not a guarantee. And both of them were like, oh, well, I would rather have a rookie because it seems like, you never know what can happen. And DMAC's all in the draft classes and stuff. But I'm like, I would rather have the quarterback who can win. You just got to figure out what's the new game plan moving forward.
Yeah, no, I'm with both of you, right? Like, have we forgotten the 6 years between Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson of what it was like to not have a quarterback and to be searching every year and going with Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch and those kind of guys? Like, yeah, you have a much better chance of fixing Russ than you do of finding a great young quarterback. Like, especially if you sign a 4-year deal, by the time you finally do find that guy, you may be out the door because you had to go through a couple of really lean years to get the draft picks so you can get them. So, yeah, I've never understood this fascination with, I want a blank slate. Well, okay, we see busts all the time. Like the New York Jets are the prime example. They've been searching forever for a quarterback. The Bears have been searching forever for a quarterback. The Dolphins to some extent. So, yeah, to put yourself in a position where you don't have the most important position in sports, check the box checked. That seems like a mistake to me.
James, to your point about the last 5 or 6 years not having a quarterback, I think this recent season should teach us that it isn't all about that guy. It's about the team and the system you put around that guy. Look at what the 49ers were able to do with Brock Purdy. The more you focus on that one guy, and it happened to be the perfect dude to scratch that itch for you, the more off balance you throw your team. You need a balanced team where everybody does their job and everyone does their job well. You don't need a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, who's a unicorn. You need a guy who distributes the ball effectively and a system of running the football and play action pass that takes advantage of the skill set of everybody on your team. It's not about the quarterback. It's about the team. And whoever comes in here has to harp on that and make that very clear to Russell that you are one of the guys, buddy. You got to be down there in the locker room with everybody else. You're not going to have an office. You're going to be a player on this team. If you don't play up to the standard, you get benched like everybody else does on the team. If they employ that tactic, they'll get this thing moving in the right direction.
You guys, and I actually got to give credit to some comments because I missed this morning. I don't know if either one of you saw it. The Broncos have completed a head coaching interview with former Raiders head coach John Gruden. Did you both see that?
What?
Mike Kliss tweeted that out at 9:37 a.m. this morning. Right? 30:23.
Are we sure that's real Mike Kliss and this isn't some?
Oh, no. You are correct. Nope. This is a false Mike Kliss. I'll give it to him. It's the stupid check marks anymore. I hate Twitter for this stuff.
You got duped.
I know I did. I was like, what on earth? The fact that we even heard that.
Well, here's the thing, Rachel.
Anybody now, if you pay for it, you get a freaking check mark. Pisses me off. Anyways, continue.
That's the point we're at in this search, though. That's the point we're at, where something like that sounds plausible because they're having to scramble and search for any name that would seemingly make sense or make a splash or be the answer. Like to some extent, the fact that nutty of a thought, a guy who's suing the league and suing the Raiders and left on very bad terms, would even be somebody who'd be like, oh yeah, I can see that. That tells you where we're at in this process. It really does.
That's true.
But I will say this real quick. Real quick though, James, you're a big proponent of the splash, right? You like the splash hire, you like the splash signing. You advocated a couple years back for signing Tim Tebow as a tight end just for the splash, just to put some butts in the seats, right? The splash doesn't work, guys. The splash gets everybody wet. We need a nice, quiet hire, somebody who can come in and take control. It's not about a splashy guy. Whenever it's a splash, that it means it's about that person, and it destabilizes the whole point of a team sport. It's not about one guy. It's about this group. Who's going to be the person who can lead the group without splashing and getting everybody wet?
Well, I mean, I do agree with you. D'Amico Ryans was my pick. I mean, it was Harbaugh first, and once he went back to Michigan, it was D'Amico Ryans. So he wasn't a splash. He was the right guy. But I think given where the Broncos are at, they're trying to save face and not look like, hey, nobody wants this job. I think they're going to be looking to make a splash because that'll be them saying, look, we were able to go get insert big name here, as opposed to we had to settle for Jim Caldwell or David Shaw or Raheem Morris or somebody like that. So I'm not necessarily the big splash guy. I just think that's what this group is trying to do. That's why they flew out to Ann Arbor to meet with Jim Harbaugh again, is because they're trying to make the splash.
And it's a bad idea. It's a bad look, especially when they turn you down. You know, you're just standing there looking stupid.
Well, and what would make you turn them down? That's where my head goes, right? The personality trait of how that interview had to have gone. If they are just this like huge power ego, like that's where my head automatically goes, is that they are willing to come out here, fly out to my hometown when I've already told them no, just because they think I'm going to sign with them. That just shows me that it's like a massive power ego. And I just don't love that.
Well, I'm with you, but that's how it looks now, right? Like, let's say they introduce him as the new head coach on Thursday, right? Well, then it'll look like, hey, they had the Zoom interview. Then they went out here and did the in-person interview. And then he was their guy. Like, things will look and make a lot more sense at that point, because the tweets and the information we got yesterday were always saying that Jim Harbaugh didn't totally close the door. Like, you know, as he said now, but he hasn't closed the door. And if he goes to the NFL, he wants to go to the Broncos. Okay, that sounds like maybe they're just trying to, you know, make the Penners not look foolish, unless they get him. if they get him and he just stuck around until National Signing Day was over, be kind of a bad move for the kids who chose the Wolverines. But then it would make sense, and then it wouldn't look pathetic. But if he really does stay at Michigan, yeah, it'll look like a pathetic move. So we gotta wait and see. We gotta wait and see, because there is that little nugget out there of he hasn't completely closed the door, which makes me ask, well, why? Why hasn't he closed the door?
We've obviously seen a lot of the battles around the media, and I don't mean like battles against each other, but there's somebody in the Broncos who is talking to insiders, and then I'm believing the PR department is talking to insiders. Who do we think from the Broncos, from the ownership group, or whoever it is talking to the media?
I would think it's George Paton. I don't know that Greg Penner and Condoleezza Rice care to talk to the media. I don't know that they have their guys that they're connected to that they leak information to. I don't think that's what's going on. So I think up to this point, it's probably George Paton. I think if the owners want to talk and want to get information out, it goes via the PR guys, right? Like they would tell Patrick, hey, this is what's going on, and Patrick would spread that around to whoever he wants to spread it to. So I think it depends on who the insider is, but Tom Pelissero is an example. My guess is that's coming from George Paton. That's my guess.
I don't know who it is, but whoever's doing it needs to stop. It's a mistake to be even talking to the media at all, especially with all the conjecture and the way the game of telephone works. You say one thing, and then 10 minutes later, it's a total different thing. Other than saying who you're going to interview and who you're going to give a second interview to, don't say anything else. Keep this mum and go about it in a professional manner. Whenever there's leaks and people, making conjecture and editorializing what's going on, it creates a lot of confusion, a lot of doubt. And if I'm a player on that team, of course, those guys are paying attention because their new coach is still up in the air. So they're wondering who's going to be this leader to come in? How are things going to change for me? What's the system that's going to come in? They're talking to their agents. Right now, there's so much confusion there. And the only thing that they get are these sometimes baseless reports coming out that makes them only more confused about the organization they work for. I think those guys have to keep a tighter lip and not share any of this information with anyone.
I like it. I'm sick of it. I'm done with it. It's exhausting. I finished my day and I'm like, all right, well, there were 5 different leads going this way. I'm done with it. I'm like, just call me when you have a head coach and we can figure it out from there. Let's just say none of the candidates that we have, okay? Just because we're playing the who the heck knows what could possibly happen. None of the candidates that we've been told are going to sign to be the Broncos head coach. If you could just pick a random name, who would you want?
Boy, I mean, I just said you can't, you can cross the same river, but it's never the same water. So I can't go Mike Shanahan, although that rumor has been out there. That would certainly excite the fan base. It would certainly be a name that would make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Great offensive mind. I mean, if anybody can fix Russ, it would be him. If it's some of the assistant coaches that are either lost yesterday or are still, their teams are still playing, it'll be a really bad look, right? Like, well, why didn't you interview Jonathan Gannon 2 weeks ago when you could have? Like, why is he in your second group of 4 or 5 or 6 or however many coaches? So I don't know. There really isn't one out there that excites me. Like, you always hear Bill Cowher and Tony Dungy and former coaches like that. I don't know that any of those guys would get me really fired up and thinking, hey, this all worked out for the best.
I'm going to give the same answer I gave earlier, and it's not a pipe dream. It's Ejiro Evero. You have to listen to the way his players speak about him. It's really important to think about how a coach connects with the players. Listen to those defensive players, the way they talk about this dude. Not only do they respect him, they're engaged with him. They believe that he is a genius type of football mind. He got them going in the right direction and made them believe on a team where the actual leadership at the very top was lackluster and the offense was performing incredibly poorly. To keep those guys mentally focused on what they're doing, to not turn on the offense, to come to work every day professionally and put up the type of performances they were. And not only that, but they all say this guy's going to be a head coach. Why not our head coach? Why not right now? Listen to the players in that locker room, the ones like Justin Simmons, who you just inked a super long deal to. Listen to that guy. What does he think about these guys? I don't think you should, have them choose, but talk to them about the guys in their building that could be right for that position. I think Ejiro Evero is going to be a fantastic head coach in the NFL, and he's on this staff right now. Make him the Broncos head coach.
And James, just to clarify, they did not dismiss him as the DC. They've just dismissed him as he will not be taking the head coaching position, correct?
Correct. Yeah, he's still under contract as the defensive coordinator. Now, he can interview in other places. Justin Outen is the same way. So all of those guys could conceivably return. Like if Jerry Rosberg is named the head coach or the longest interim head coach in franchise history, you could have the same staff that you had last year. I just look at that of what a debacle the 2022 season was, and I want to wash my hands of all of it. It's just all of them need to go.
But you can't, James. You can't because 70% of your players are going to be back.
I
and
get
they
it.
played really bad for most of the season and pretty good those last couple games, and the defense was good the whole time. You cannot wash your hands of the whole thing. These players are going to be here. So if you bring in a whole new coach with a whole new staff, those guys don't know these players. They have to start from square one. Russell Wilson is a complicated fella. This coaching staff bored some holes into his tough exterior and peeled back some layers. They're starting to figure out this dude. If you bring in a whole new staff, his defenses are going to be back up. It's going to be Russell back on Russell, 2.0. We're not going to be able to get through to him. Think about the guys you already have here. They're going to be here next year no matter what. How do you get them to play well?
Well, why don't we just bring back Hackett then, right? Bring them all back.
Come on.
Put them all back out there.
Come on.
Give them another shot. Let's
Draw, man.
Rerun it with the whole same group. I mean, come on. There's a defense that faded badly down the stretch. I mean, they didn't force a single punt on Christmas Day. The first time that's happened in
bad game. Nobody's arguing that. That was a horrible game for everybody. Sometimes the team just doesn't
against the Chiefs. They weren't good against the Chargers. They faded badly down the stretch. They really did.
But when you have nothing to play for, you have no motivation to show up besides getting your paycheck, you're not going to play super well.
Well, hey, we can't. I was just hearing how Ejiro Evero kept this team focused and kept that defense playing hard, even when the season was lost.
They beat the Chargers at the end of the season. You just said they played bad. They won the game, James.
The defense didn't play very well.
The team won the game. They played well enough to win.
They had to put up 30. They also gave up a game-winning touchdown to Tyler Huntley, a 92-yard touchdown drive.
How many points did the Ravens score in that game, James?
So
how many?
That one's about points and not losing. But late in the year, it's about the win and not the points. So
it's a body of work, James.
It's
a body of work.
They only gave up 12, so that's a win, even though they lost. They gave up 30, but the Broncos won, so that's a one. Like Ejiro Evero gets a W for everything. Like we can't have it both ways.
Just look at the numbers, man. It was a good defense.
It was an okay defense.
Okay.
We can agree to disagree. One thing we can agree with is that there was some interesting football this weekend. I wouldn't say they were quite as splashy, since we're talking about splashes, as last year's games, but they were definitely interesting. I will say the 49ers and their quarterbacks, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on over there with the health of them, but it's scary. I was waiting for Christian McCaffrey to go in as QB. It's not that I wanted to see anybody get hurt, but I was curious how Christian McCaffrey was going to look as the quarterback of the 49ers for maybe even just one play. That's all I needed.
Yeah, it had to be a really, really disappointing. Well, even for Eagles fans, not a fulfilling game there. You know what I mean? You want to beat the team at their best. Brock Purdy gets hurt and only throws 4 passes. He was already their third-string quarterback. So you're right. It was pretty rough. It would have been pretty interesting to see Christian McCaffrey under center. One fun fact about me, you guys don't know, I was the emergency quarterback for our team in my last year here with the Denver Broncos. So there were games in which if both of the guys had gotten hurt, I would have been under center, taking snaps. It's something you actually practice a couple times to make sure you can take a snap, turn around, and give a handoff. They're not going to be calling, fancy pass plays for him back there, but you have to be prepared for that eventuality. And the league might adjust its rules to allow an extra quarterback to suit up. Who knows? They might not. But a great season by the 49ers, a great coaching job by Kyle Shanahan, able to get whatever quarterback was in there to play at a high level. Josh Johnson goes in there in the NFC Championship game. Were you guys thinking like me that, wow, if Josh can bring him back to a victory, what a story that would be if Josh Johnson goes from the practice squad on the Denver Broncos to starting in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs? But it wasn't to be.
Yeah, it would have been a great story. I was rooting for it. I was rooting for the Niners. That said, it could have set up for a really bad Super Bowl, depending on, would Jimmy G be able to come back, or gosh, who would have even been their quarterback? So probably dodge that one. But yeah, it was a shame because basically they had to play 3/4 of the game without a quarterback. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty tough sledding. And they were in it, and it was really the fumble by Josh Johnson right before half. If you go in at half down 14-7, you got yourself a shot. That made it 21-7 because they gave the Eagles great field position and Philly cashed in. That was the ball game at that point. If you're within one score and you're having to kind of hodgepodge at quarterback and you can run the ball and rely on your defense, they had a chance. Once you're down 2 scores, especially on the road, they were toast. So It was a shame. That's a tough way for a great season to end for the 49ers.
But I don't think anyone can come at the 49ers and say, they didn't have a chance because of the injuries. It's not that they didn't deserve to be in that game or that they lost because they were a fully healthy squad and the Eagles were just that much better. So that's like a weird way to be like, you guys had a really good season. Like, don't let this loss affect you, especially next year, because who knows what's going to happen between Trey Lance, Jimmy G. I'm sure he's going to be gone. But then you also got a bright star in Brock Purdy too. He's like the 1 in a million of you get a rookie QB and he can lead you into the playoffs and have a fantastic career. So other one, Bengals Chiefs. I couldn't think of it for a quick second because Joe Burrow, poor Joe Burrow.
Poor Joe.
He doesn't get to keep Burrow. What do they call it? Burrowhead. There you go. I had to think of what Travis Kelce said last night. But that's
in my ass.
I know, so funny. Well, it was a good game. It was still also kind of a boring game, you guys. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, until like the very end. But I still feel like there's been a lot of other games where you're literally like, oh my gosh, this game is just getting crazier and crazier. And yesterday just kind of felt like another football game, James.
Yeah, the trip to the Super Bowl got put on a silver platter and handed to the Chiefs, and they said, thank you, I'll take it. I thought it was egregious what happened late in that game. And look, you're not going to get every call right, but when every call goes the same direction toward the same team, call me a conspiracy theorist, say I got to put on my tinfoil hat, like Mike Evans said this morning when I was on with he and Stink. It was obvious to me. I mean, it was every call went against the Bengals and every non-call went against the Bengals.
That's not true. That's not true, James.
It was ridiculous.
That's not true, James. What about that taunting call on the offensive lineman just going, he was just joking around and he gets a 15-yard penalty?
Late, but we're talking about late in the game, right? It's the late hit on Burrow, no call.
You should call the game differently late in the game than early in the game?
You should.
Oh, how's that?
If you're going to throw a 15-yard flag with 8 seconds left that determines the season, it better be egregious. Like
that was a penalty, man.
Oh my God!
You can't do that. You can't. You can't.
That wasn't a penalty for the first 80 years of NFL history. That was a joke.
So
that was a joke.
We've changed the rules, James. We've changed the rules the way we penalize players around quarterbacks. You can't touch a quarterback, especially on the sideline.
Well,
He's out of bounds.
If you're Frank Clark, you can take 3 steps and hit Joe Burrow right in the mouth. That's not a penalty. But if you touch Patrick Mahomes while he's got 1 foot out of bounds, oh my gosh! I hope he's okay from that hit. Is he going to be able to play in the Super Bowl? Because boy, that was a rough one. No, you don't determine the game at that point, and that was a game-deciding flag, and that just drives me nuts. Officials should not insert themselves into the narrative of the game, and that was the number one narrative from that game is how bad the officiating was. I just think it's a shame.
And
a sham.
I also want to give
sham. It's a shamly shame.
James, I want to give you 30 seconds to rant about the Nuggets and Malone and their performance on Saturday and how they didn't play on Wednesday, excuse me. So I want to give you 30 seconds because I'm curious to hear your rant.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I don't know what it's going to take for people to come around on Michael Malone. But, here's a guy who continues to mismanage games, mismanage matchups, mismanage his roster of, we can't play in a back-to-back. It's so unfair. And he's going to go up in front of the media and talk about how the NBA needs to fix it. Hey, Mike Malone, they changed to this schedule in 1967. That's 55 years ago. They used to fly commercial. Now they fly in chartered jets. They sleep in big comfy beds at the Ritz-Carlton, and you can't play 2 nights in a row. And then 4 days later or 3 days later, when you have to be playing on national TV, your guys aren't ready to go and they lose and they squander a lead. Michael Malone's in-game decisions are a huge problem for this team. Huge problem. They blew a 19-point lead at the Kings. They almost blew one to the Pelicans. They blew a 15-point lead the other day. The number one thing that can prevent the Nuggets from winning a title is Michael Malone. People need to come around to that realization.
Yeah, they're first place in the West, and their coach just sucks. Right?
Hey, so see, you're like everybody else.
Come on, James.
That's why it's Teflon Mike. No criticism, Teflon Mike.
They're in first place, man. They're in first place.
Okay.
That doesn't matter?
No, it matters. It matters. But where would they be? How much further ahead would they be if they had somebody better than Michael Malone?
Who's better than Michael Malone?
Come on. There's coaches all around the league that are better than Michael Malone.
No, who would you ever have?
But we shall see. I mean, he's 1-8 in his last 9 playoff games, right? Against the Warriors. I get it. That's a tough matchup. But make an adjustment. Try to do something different. instead of just rolling out for 5 games doing the exact same thing. So I think he's the weak link. I think they have a really good roster. And again, it's Michael Malone, the Warriors getting healthy, or injuries. That's the only thing that can derail this team. The fact that Michael Malone is on that list is a problem.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'm with you. They have to win it. They at least, I think, have to go to the finals this year, in my personal opinion. You got the squad. You can't waste any more of Jokic's years. You got to go to the finals. If they win, I think they're kind of with the Avs of the what's the word I'm looking for, gentlemen? Top of the top, the anticipation, the something along those lines.
We have expectations.
Thank you. It's so high that I think they have to win it this year. If they don't, I think we have a disappointment on our hands. But hey, we'll see. Again, if you make it to the finals, it's hard to also say this season is a complete disappointment because that's a lot of basketball to be played. But as always, Nate, an absolute pleasure having you for the past 2 days. Thank you so much for taking time and coming on with us. We'll definitely have you back. James, is always a pleasure. And to everyone in the comments, we love you guys. We love hearing all of your takes. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. for another edition of Coffee Break. Have a wonderful Monday, everybody. Bye.